It's called the WNBA, but that W has league officials so confused. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. If you want to watch today's show, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. And this is a unique podcast. Welcome to those who are listening for the first time. I encourage you parents to listen with your teens and preteens. We are going to talk openly about the best ideas of the political left and non-believers. We don't need to be afraid of those ideas. Destructive messages are pervasive in our culture. And instead of shielding our teens from those messages, we need to equip them with the knowledge and tools about how to think about those arguments and ultimately defeat them. And teens, if you want to debate like Charlie Kirk did or ask questions like Ali Beth Stuckey, you simply must understand your opponent's best argument. And today we are going to talk about men playing in the WNBA, or I guess more broadly, who should be eligible to play in the WNBA. Now, I'm not someone who has watched a lot of WNBA basketball, I will admit, but this is kind of the latest cultural flashpoint on this hot button issue of should men be allowed to play in a women's sport if they claim they are women. So if a man says, actually, I'm a woman, should that man be allowed to play in a female sport? All right, so this is kind of just an overview of what happened. Remember, anytime there is especially a hot button current event, you want to know what is going on. So let me do just a little bit of the setup, and then we're going to get into the arguments. On Sunday, former NBA center Enes Freedom, used to be Enes Kanter, used to play for the Oklahoma City Thunder, my favorite basketball team. Enes Freedom attended a WNBA game between the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever. He wore a shirt that said woman, noun, adult, human, female. So he wore the definition of woman on his shirt. Now, during the third quarter of the game, Sky guard Natasha Cloud started screaming at him. He stood up from his courtside seat, extended his arms, and took one step forward. Security then kicked him out of the arena. Now, this isn't going to be the last the WNBA hears about Freedom. Earlier this month, Enes Freedom announced that he is a woman and declared his eligibility for the WNBA draft. Now, there's no doubt that Freedom would physically dominate WNBA players. He stands at 6 feet 10 inches tall and during his playing career weighed 250 pounds. If he played in the WNBA, it'd be like prime Shaq playing against middle school students. Now, the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. Now, if you have been with us for a while, I hope that grade 8 question 5, is just jumping right to your mind. What do you mean by that? WNBA, when you say only women are eligible to play in the WNBA, what do you mean by woman? Now, for the vast majority of human history, everyone understood. People still understand what a woman is, even if they won't admit it, right? But everyone would have said, okay, yes, there are men and there are women, and Enes Freedom is a man, so he's not eligible. But the left, many on the left, have decided that men who declare themselves to be women are actually women, are women, just as much of a woman as my wife, just as much as a woman as your mother, and therefore those men who say they're women, since they're actually women, they must be treated as such, and to not do so is discriminatory. Okay, so there's a lot of issues here, but what I want to do is I want to look at this argument that what Enes Freedom is doing isn't protecting women. He's out to instigate, divide, and marginalize. Now, normally I will just present the argument from the other side, but today I'm going to take an argument by Jerry Brewer, writing in The Athletic, which is a major sports publication, and that's his argument. He's attacking Freedom, and he says that Freedom is out to instigate, divide, and marginalize. And I want to walk through this argument, and then I want us to think about this argument. All right, so this is what Brewer writes. The former NBA player walked into Wintrust Arena on Sunday night with a t-shirt and a grievance to sell, dressing it up as concern for women's sports. The shirt, cloaking his 10-foot or 6'10" frame, read woman, noun, adult, human, female. That's a slogan built for agitation, not conversation. All right, so here's the start of his argument. Remember, this is Brewer's argument. Is that wearing a shirt into a WNBA game that defines the word woman is a slogan built for agitation, not conversation. Let's have a pause point. Remember, that's another unique thing about this podcast. Parents, I encourage you to actually physically stop the podcast and discuss these questions with your teen or preteen. And the reason we do that is because, parents, you are your teen's most important teacher. And so use this podcast as a way to start those discussions. All right, first pause point. Which of the grade 8 questions would you use in response to this argument or kind of an assertion right here? That wearing the definition of woman is a slogan built for agitation, not conversation. And as a reminder, the grade 8 questions are questions that you put in your mental toolbox so that you have ways to attack arguments and issues when they come to you. Question 1 is, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? And remember that just because I don't choose the question that you did doesn't mean you are wrong. There are lots of ways to attack arguments. And I'm actually going to use question 6 here. Is this an appeal to emotion or logic? What Brewer is arguing is that wearing this shirt, given the current debate about transgender athletes or men pretending to be women being in women's sports, wearing that definition will cause agitation. Agitation is bad. Therefore, what Enes Freedom did is bad. Okay. Well, let's have a pause point. Is it wrong to agitate? What do you think? Okay, well, the answer is a lawyer's favorite answer in this case. It depends. Okay, what's happening a lot of times in the culture is they are taking phrases that are usually associated with something, and then they're kind of wielding those phrases as weapons and hoping you don't go a little bit deeper. Okay, because we're going to turn to question 3 of the grade 8. Is there a principle involved? So if someone says, is it wrong to agitate? Well, what's our principle? I would submit that the principle needs to be the truth. And it's more important to have the truth. It's more important to promote the truth. And if that agitates someone else, that's kind of on them. And sometimes when you need to push the truth, yeah, you do want to stir the pot in a smart way, not just to poke people, but what Enes Freedom did here was a very, very smart way to draw attention to the WNBA's kind of hypocrisy. And so it's not always wrong to agitate. And so I hope you can see that, is that, if you are a teenager, your parents probably will tell you, don't agitate your little sister. Don't agitate your little brother. Can you please just keep the peace? And so oftentimes our frame of reference is that, well, agitation is always bad. That's not the case. And the reason is that the foundational principle is truth. And sometimes agitation can lead us closer to the truth when we're engaging in a hostile culture. And for evidence of this, I'm actually going to also go to question 8. What does the Bible say? And let's have another pause point. Can you think of any examples of people in the Bible who agitated against those who oppose them? Hmm. Because I think this kind of argument by implication is often very effective against Christians because, there's kind of this idea that, well, if I'm a Christian, I'm supposed to keep the peace and I'm supposed to, live at peace with all men. Remember, that's as far as it depends on you, live, live at peace with all men. But, I should be nice and, I should just make sure that no one thinks bad about Jesus because of what I did. Okay, there is a reason for that impression, but we have to be careful that we don't take the impression over the truth of God's word. So again, there are different examples of godly men and women agitating for the truth, agitating for the kingdom of God. One of the ones that came to my mind is in 1 Kings 18. There's been a drought in the land that the Lord brought about, and he told Elijah to tell King Ahaz there's going to be a drought, and Elijah assembles all the people on the mountain after I believe it's 3 years of drought, and he challenges the prophets of Baal, and he says, let's determine once and for all who is actually God. Is it Baal or is it the God of Israel? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a challenge, and we're going to sacrifice on the altar, and the God that answers by fire, he is God. And he very, very gentlemanly lets the prophets of Baal go first. And so they prepare a bowl on an altar, and then they start calling on the name of Baal from morning till noon, it says in 1 Kings 18. But no one responded. No one answered. And at noon, so after a few hours, Elijah begins to taunt them. Shout louder. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. Okay, Elijah is agitating here. And that is not presented as a sin because he's agitating against evil. And I hope you know the end of the story. Go read 1 Kings 18. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. After all day, the prophets of Baal fail to have Baal bring fire to the altar. Elijah repairs the altar of the Lord. He drenches the altar in water. He builds a pit around the altar, and the water, there's so much water overflow, it fills the pit. And he calls on the name of the Lord. He says, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back. And then the fire of the Lord falls on the sacrifice. It's so hot and intense, it burns the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even takes the water up from the trench. And the people repent. Well, I guess I shouldn't have, I don't know if maybe repent is too far, but the people fall down to the ground and they cry, the Lord, he is God. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, an example of God's power. But don't miss it, right? Elijah is agitating. He is mocking the prophets of Baal, and that's not presented as a sin in any means. Well, maybe that's just the Old Testament, Victor. Surely Jesus would never, be so mean. Well, go to Matthew 23. This is the 7 woes, and I'm only going to go through a couple of them because I fear I'm going to go quite long with this episode. I'm sorry. But this is Jesus talking to the Pharisees. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much of a child of hell as you are. So Christian, if someone comes to you and says, oh, well, you're agitating, you're provoking someone, it's okay to examine, but examine, am I pushing the truth? Am I pushing forward what is true? Because if someone gets agitated by that, that's on them. My highest priority needs to be pushing the truth. And in this case, the tactics of Enes Freedom are quite effective. People all around the country are talking about what he did, that he he showed the nation the hypocrisy that the WNBA is offended by the definition of the word woman. All right, well, let's get back to Brewer and this argument in the Athletic. He continues. Enes Freedom wasn't at the Indiana Fever Chicago Sky game to defend women's sports against transgender participation. He wasn't there to support or persuade. What? Okay, no, that's simply not true, right? Like he is on a mission. He has been doing podcasts, using his social media to talk about the importance of having just women be in women's sports. Yes, and so drawing attention to the issue is an example of trying to persuade people, and it's an example of trying to support women who don't want to compete against men. All right, Brewer continues. Enes Freedom is here to play with all of our emotions, and it's too bad we cannot regulate any of these feelings. Okay, I'm sorry. It's just so funny that, here he is condemning Enes Freedom for sitting in the crowd cheering during the game. He has nothing to say about the player on the court who went to the stands and started yelling at a fan. Anyway, that's an aside. Let me go back to Brewer's argument. A few weeks ago, Enes Freedom tried to declare himself eligible for the 2027 WNBA draft, saying that he identifies as a woman. Yeah, this is true. Okay, so Enes Freedom earlier this month said, I am a woman. I'm declaring, that makes me eligible for the WNBA draft. I'm declaring myself for the WNBA draft. And this is what Brewer says about that. It's not just a false claim, it's a cruel one. It's not just a false claim, it's a cruel one. Another former NBA player, this is Brewer writing, Royce Young tagged along. Together, they've done real damage, misrepresenting trans people as cross-dressers, invalidating their humanity to make a joke. In their minds, they're countering absurdity with absurdity. In reality, there's no argument in their antics at all. Okay, so let's see. Brewer is a good writer. He's got, kind of rhetorically, he's making some very strong claims. He's got some interesting wordplay. But just because someone is saying something confidently or writing on a big platform doesn't mean that what they're saying makes any sense at all. And oftentimes what you will find is that when people have nothing substantive to argue, they will go to the fact that, they can write well to cover up the fact. Okay, so Brewer's making a couple of claims here. He's saying it's cruel for Enes Freedom to say that he's a woman and declare for the draft. Okay, what Enes Freedom is doing is he is taking the left's beliefs, what the left says about who is transgender, and he's applying that to himself and the WNBA. Yeah, this is what leftists say. If someone says that he is a woman, he is a woman. Because transgender identity is self-determined. If you go to New York and you look at their civil rights statutes, and they prohibit, quote unquote, discrimination on the basis of gender identity, that they define it as a self-definition, right? That there's no requirement for hormones or surgeries or for living as the opposite sex for a certain amount of time. It's a self-determination. And what the left has said for years is that if you question someone's transgender identity, you're being cruel. That's what's cruel. And in many cases, they have tried to fire people. They've tried to hound them out of polite society for doing that. So that is the principle that the left has laid down, right? We think about the grade 8, question 3. Is there a principle involved? This is the principle involved. What Enes Freedom is doing by saying that he's a woman and then declaring for the draft is he's saying, okay, this is your principle. This is the principle you've set down. I think there's a problem with this principle because it allows men to compete in women's sports. But if this is your principle, we're going for it. And I am ready to play in the WNBA. So what we've seen is that Enes Freedom and another former NBA player named Royce White, but just for the sake of simplicity, we'll stick with Enes Freedom. He's self-identified as a woman. That means he has met the left's standard to become a woman, and now he wants to play in the NBA. That is why the left is so upset. This is Brewer. Go back to his argument. He says, in reality, there's no argument in their antics at all. All right, let's have a pause point. What do you think would happen if Enes Freedom played in the WNBA? All right, the answer to that should be pretty obvious. He would immediately become not just the best WNBA player, but so much better than anyone else in the league that it would be absurd, that it would simply be an absurdity. And so what his argument is that, okay, if this is your principle, if this is your standard, I'm going to adopt that standard and I'm going to show how absurd it is on the basketball court. Now, if he goes undrafted, which I think is what would probably happen if this plays out over the next few months, he will have a very strong legal case under New York City's civil rights law, as I just mentioned, because it defines gender identity very broadly. Now, the obvious solution to all of this is defining the word woman. And very helpfully, Enes Freedom put the definition on his shirt. But defining the word woman would require the WNBA to reject the woke ideology that's pervasive throughout the league. So you see the brilliance of what he's done? He has put the league in what I like to call a double bind. If the league goes along with the principle that it's been espousing, that if a man says he's a woman and he should be treated as a woman, if the league goes along with that, on the court, Enes will expose that for being absurd. And if the league defines the word woman as adult human female, all of a sudden they've had to reject this principle that the left and many in the WNBA have been upholding. All right, let's continue to look at Brewer's argument. Enes Freedom bought a ticket and manufactured an incident that no league, men's or women's, is fully equipped to outmaneuver. Okay, I'm just going to remind you, just because someone is well known or they say something confident doesn't mean that what they're saying makes any sense at all. So let's have a pause point. What would you say in response to this contention? Enes Freedom bought a ticket and manufactured an incident that no league, men's or women's, is fully equipped to outmaneuver. Because if we go to question 5, what do you mean by that? Do you know how you could outmaneuver what Enes Freedom did? You could define the word woman as adult human female. There's nothing to outmaneuver. You've just defined the word. Enes Freedom isn't eligible to play because he's a man. Now, his point is made, but you would not have been outmaneuvered. All right, let's keep going. Again, this is Jerry Brewer writing in Athletic. In this instance, the WNBA is a victim of its inclusive identity. All season, numerous culture wars have feasted on that trait because it's easier to infiltrate an open door than a locked one. All right, let's have a pause point. Can you think of a way that the WNBA is not inclusive? Okay, this is what's so, when they use these terms like inclusive or diversity or divisive, you have to look at how they're using the word and then kind of take one step beyond that. There are 180 players in the WNBA. up to 12 players per team, 15 teams in the league, maximum of 180 players. If you have a league with 180 players in it, you know what you are not? Inclusive. In fact, you are very exclusive. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise because professional sports is supposed to be for the best of the best of the best of the best. And given that there are several billion women in the world and less than around 180 players in the WNBA is not inclusive. And that's okay, unless you've said that, well, we have to always be inclusive. We're going to have this principle that, we have to be inclusive. And there's another argument here, because if you go with the left's definition, the left's argument on the transgender issue, every man that comes into the league is going to take a woman's spot in the league. It's going to take her job, and that's going to exclude her. So you really got to watch out for terms like inclusive, diversity, divisive, because those words aren't principles. They're descriptions of things that happen, and they can either be good or either be bad. And I want to sit here for a little bit because so often in our culture, words like inclusive or diversity are portrayed as universal goods. So I want you to think of a time. Let's have a pause point. When is there a time when inclusion isn't appropriate? When is diversity a negative thing? Okay, I really want you to think about this because so often in our culture, these words, these terms are pushed and, you're not inclusive? You don't support diversity? And what I want you to see is that there are times throughout all of our lives when there are situations when no, you don't support inclusion. And in fact, supporting inclusion would be absurd. One example. Teenagers, I'm going to guess your parents have a checking account. You know who they haven't included on that checking account? Me! They haven't included me on their checking account. How dare you? Don't you know you're supposed to be inclusive? This summer, I had vacation plans with my family. And you know what? I didn't include you, my wonderful listeners, in my vacation plans because you weren't in my family. You weren't included. And I wasn't included in your family's vacation plans. And that's okay because inclusion is just a description. It's not a moral principle to always uphold. Now let's think about diversity. When I go to the doctor, when I go and have a procedure, you know what I don't want? I don't want a diversity of education completion among the medical professionals. I don't want a high school dropout running my anesthesia. I don't want someone with, who's an HVAC tech from community college diagnosing my health. Just like I wouldn't want a doctor, if he didn't know anything about air conditioning, working on my HVAC system. Okay, so this idea that the culture prevents that diversity is always a positive. We have to have diversity. We have to have diversity. No, we don't. There are many times when we don't want diversity. And what's so funny about this, of course, is that if you go to college campuses where they talk about diversity constantly, you know what they often don't have? Diversity of opinion. They aren't interested in that. All right, another example. The military. A long time ago, I was in the Army National Guard, and we learned I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. That's the soldier's creed. It is pounded into your head. And you know what they don't want? They don't want someone saying, hey, I have diversity of opinion on that. I think we should place the mission second. No, there is no room for that in the military. There's no room for that type of diversity in the military. There has to be unity of purpose. Okay, so make sure you understand that there is a difference between descriptive words like inclusion and diversity and foundational truths like Christianity, absolute truth, moral virtue. things like that. All right, before we continue, let me tell you about a terrific book, especially for teens. It's called Memory Burn by J.T. Lindstrom. It's set in a dystopian future. It's not so dystopian that they can't define the word woman, but it's a dystopian future where AI has taken over. Memory Burn has terrific action sequences and memorable characters like Elias Vane. He's a smuggler with who takes a no questions asked job that leads to lots of questions, especially about his past and all that AI has been up to. Fair warning, I definitely stayed up way too late one night finishing this book, and both of my older kids really enjoyed Memory Burn. Check it out today. All right, let's go to Brewer. I know I'm pushing a half hour here. I apologize, but I want to talk about another major section of his argument because I think you see this a lot, especially online. Okay, so Brewer is continuing. Remember, he's opposed to Enes Freedom showing up at a game wearing the definition of the word woman on his shirt. And here's what he writes. In 1967, a Boston Marathon official named Jock Semple spotted a 20-year-old runner, Catherine Switzer, mid-race and decided she didn't belong. He grabbed her and tried to tear her off her bib. The sport's governing body didn't respond by investigating what Semple did to Switzer. Instead, it wrote a new rule banning women from racing against men, to protect them. 4 decades earlier at the 1928 Olympics, officials decided after an 800-meter final that the distance was too dangerous for women. Why? Because of reports of runners collapsing post-race that footage later proved to be exaggerated. The event didn't return to the Olympics for 32 years. Don't compare the issues. This is Brewer writing. Just look at the eerily, lazily similar mindset. It's a new century, but the playbook remains. With ulterior motives, men decide what women need protecting from, and what follows is never protection. Okay, you see this kind of argument crop up, and I want to walk through the response because it can seem very appealing. Like, oh man, that's weird. What in the world were they doing back then? So, first response: you have to recognize the type of argument. Bad things once happened. This is what the argument is a bad thing once happened, therefore this thing must happen. Slavery. The U.S. had slavery, therefore this. Okay. And what's kind of amazing is he gives away the argument here. He says, never mind any differences. Actually, he says, don't compare the issues, but that's basically what he's saying is, right? Never mind the differences in the events. Just look at the mindset. Okay, this is a distraction technique. Bad things happened in the past. That shouldn't surprise us because people are sinners. That doesn't answer what in the world we should do now. Okay, this is really an attempt to dismiss the situation that's happening right now by saying, well, this happened a long time ago. You can't fix this, so therefore you have to take the position I have now. All right, second response. He says that women shouldn't be protected by men. Okay, well, why are you so upset about Enes Freedom playing against women? By the left's definition, he is a woman. So if you don't think women should be protected from men, then let Freedom play. All right, response number 3. This is actually an example of question number 7 in the grade 8. Am I focused on the speaker or the argument? Right? He's distracting here. He literally tells you, like, don't compare the issues. Just look at the lazy mindset. So don't dig into the details. Just take this conclusion that I have and plop it into the situation. And then response number 4. There are plenty of women who oppose men in women's sports. In fact, the most famous people who oppose men in women's sports are generally women. Think of names like Riley Gaines, Sophia Cunningham. Here in Nevada, the UNR women's volleyball team refused to play against a San Jose State team that had a man on it. Marcy Smith with Icons. And what's so amazing is this author simply ignores them. He ignores all of the women on one side to try and create this false dichotomy that, oh, well, it's just men who are supporting Enes Freedom. No, there are plenty of women who want to protect women's sports and are thrilled to have men engage in this issue. And here's the thing. The WNBA has an easy solution to all of this. Simply define the word woman. And if you can't do that, then maybe you should try just getting rid of the W, merging the WNBA and the NBA, and seeing how many women make the team. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.